Hello everyone, welcome to Math Help Sessions. My name is Sathana and today's topic is easy trinomial factoring. Let's start off with the basic structure that you need in order to factor an expression using easy trinomial factoring. That expression must be in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, where a must be equal to 1 and the degree of the polynomial must be 2. In other words, the highest exponent in this expression must be a 2. Now, in order to factor, we're trying to find two terms whose product is equal to c and whose sum is equal to b. By finding those two numbers, we can then plug them into this factored form, which is x plus or minus a term times x plus or minus the other term. And whether the sign is plus or minus will depend on the product and the sum, which you will see while I'm doing some examples. Now let's go to those examples. Example number 1, x squared minus 2x minus 15. Here, we need to find two numbers whose product is equal to c, which is negative 15, and whose sum is equal to b, which is negative 2. Now, before we determine what those two numbers are, we can determine the signs that will be in each of those brackets just by looking at the product and sum. We need to find two numbers that when multiplied together will give you a negative number. That's only possible when you have a positive number and a negative number. So we know that our factored form will look like this. X plus a term times x minus another term. What are those terms? Well, we need to find numbers that you can multiply to get negative 15, such as negative 1 times 15, negative 15 times 1, negative 3 times 5, negative 5 times 3. In this case, the two numbers that work are negative 5 times positive 3. So if you put them back into this factored form, we get x plus 3 times x minus 5. And we know that this is the right answer because if we expand these two brackets, we will get the original expression. X times x equals to x squared. X times negative 5 equals to negative 5x. 3 times x is equal to 3x. And negative 5x plus 3x is equal to negative 2x. And 3 times negative 5 is equal to negative 15. So we know we have done our factoring correctly. Example number 2. X squared minus 14x plus 24. Here we need to find two numbers whose product is equal to 24 and whose sum is equal to negative 14. First, let's determine the signs in those two brackets. We need to find two numbers that when you multiply them together is a positive answer, but when you add them together they must be negative. That's only possible when both numbers are negative. So we know that our factored form will look like this. X minus a number times x minus another number. What are those numbers? Well, some possible numbers that multiply to get 24 are 24 times 1, or 12 times 2, or 6 times 4. However, the only two numbers that work in this case are negative 12 and negative 2. So if you plug them into our factored form, we get x minus 12 times x minus 2. Example number 3, 3x squared minus 21x plus 30. You might be wondering, well, in this case, our a value isn't 1, so how is this easy trinomial factoring? But if you look more closely at this, you can see that all three terms have a common factor of 3. So if we factor that 3 out, we get 3 times x squared minus 7x plus 10, which is now an expression that can be factored using the easy trinomial factoring method. Now we need to find two numbers whose product is equal to 10 and whose sum is equal to negative 7. Before that, let's determine the signs in the two brackets. We need to find two numbers that when you multiply together give you a positive result, but when you add them together give you a negative result. And that can only work when the two signs are negative. So we know that the factored form will look like this. 3 times x minus a number times x minus another number. What are those two numbers? Well, the possibilities that we can have are 10 times 1 or 5 times 2, and both numbers will be negative. The only two numbers that work in this case are negative 5 and negative 2. So if we put those two numbers back into our factored form, we get 3 times x minus 5 times x minus 2. And finally, our fourth example, x squared plus 2xy minus 48y squared. Here, we're looking for two numbers whose product is equal to negative 48 and whose sum is equal to 2. Before we find out the two numbers, let's first determine the signs in each of the two brackets. We need to find two numbers that when you multiply them together, get you a negative number. And the only way that works is if one of them is positive and one of them is negative. However, it's also important to note that here we have y squared. And you can only get y squared when you're multiplying two y's together. So we know that the format of the factored form must be x times a number multiplied by y times x minus another number multiplied by y. What are those two numbers? Well, let's see some numbers that you can multiply to get negative 48. You can get negative 48 times 1, or negative 12 times 4, or negative 6 times 8. The numbers that work here are positive 8 and negative 6. So if we plug those back into our original factored form, we get x plus 8y times x minus 6y. To recap, in order to be able to do easy trinomial factoring, you must have an expression in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, where a must be equal to 1. And in order to factor, you need to find two numbers whose product is equal to c and whose sum is equal to b. And once you find those two numbers, you can plug them into this factored format, which will be x plus or minus a number times x plus or minus the other number. And the sign in each of those brackets will depend on the product and the sum in the expression. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you understand how to do easy trinomial factoring. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.